Morning, everyone. How are you? I'm Mr. Taylor, and I'm joined by Miss Barr, who will be assisting us today. And today we want to look at continuing our preparation for Language Arts BGCSE. We want to look specifically today at the directed writing question. I see we have quite a few participants present, and so it's glad that you are with us. So I'm going to share the screen and begin. Please do, if the presentation does not come up, can you kindly click F5 on your computers or to refresh the screen so that's an updated. If it doesn't update, you can send a message in the chat window for us and we will ensure that you are there. But as indicated, we are going to be looking at today directed writing question. For those who may be joining for the first time, I'm Mr. Taylor. Yesterday we looked at approaching the paper 3 in its entirety as a whole, how to approach the paper. We saw that the last two questions are the lion's share of the points. We also realized that the passage is quite extensive, and we also realized that the timing does not lend for much. Therefore, I want us to just look at specifically the directed writing question today and how to approach it. It'll be a very quick session and also some tips that you are to remember when approaching this particular exam. And so therefore, as a refresher, to progress to the next slide, I just want us to go through a few of the steps very quickly. As you guys know that this particular module has been set up to assist you all with preparing for your examinations, reinforcing it, and so therefore we trust that the information will be assistive to you in those ways. So for your paper 3, which is 45% of your grade and only 2 hours and 10 minutes with a 1,750 word passage and a 400 word directed writing and potentially 2, but for sure 100 and odd word summary, it is important that you understand how to approach the paper. And so you may take down these steps, but they're very basic to remember. I want you to reformat the way you approach reading comprehension, especially paper 3. And before starting to answer, I would like for you to read through the questions first and highlight important keywords and their point value. Reading through the question first gives you a great understanding of what the passage is about, what you can expect to encounter when you read the passage. You also are given your directions for what you are actually looking for when you read. And so reading the questions gives you a very good outline of sorts of the passage, and it makes digesting such extensive material very easy to deal with. The second thing you want to do after having read all of the questions and getting an idea of the task that is set before you, I'd like for you to read the passage. But you do not just read the passage as if you are calling the words in your mind to get to the end of the sentence. You must actively read. And that means as you are reading the passage, you underline the content that you need to answer the questions. And content refers to the information from the passage to assist you in answering the questions. And so your first step is to read the questions, highlight those important key terms, and get an understanding of what you have to do after such an extensive reading. While reading that extensive piece of passage, you are to underline the content that you need. You can make notations such as brackets, etc. You can highlight with your highlighter. You can make asterisks. You can use the question numbers to indicate which paragraph it's in. But it's important that you actively read, and I suggest you follow in this particular order. The next point, after having read the questions and having read the passage, I would like for you to answer the questions in a reverse order. You start with the last question, which is the directed writing question that we will be looking at today. There are two primary reasons for that. You answer the questions in reverse order. You answer the questions in reverse order because, one, they will take the most time Two, they require you to have the most content. And so it is the most effective strategy to approaching and being successful on that paper. And then last but not least, after having answered your questions in reverse order, you are to proofread your pieces for grammar and content. Now, it is important to proofread for grammar specifically because, yes, it is an English language exam, and you will be held to the standards of the English language, of the standard English language. Even more importantly, grammar is important for those paper 4 candidates, especially because your language is graded much more heavily, so you are expected to use much more sophisticated sentence structures, much more sophisticated figurative language and vocabulary, etc. I also want to note that when you are checking your answer, you're not merely checking your answer for its grammatical soundness. You are also checking to see that have you provided sufficient content or sufficient points in your answer to get maximum value of your answer. So if a question is worth about 10 marks, you should have about 8 to 10 pieces of individual content within that response to get the 10 marks. And so those are just the 4 steps that I'd like to share with you on how to approach the paper 3. First, you read the questions, then you highlight important keywords and the point value to help you understand. Then you read the passage, you underline the content needed to answer your questions. You answer the questions in a reverse order, starting with the directed writing question. And last but not least, you proofread for grammar and content. As the note says, the last 2 questions are the summary and directed writing question. Each takes the most time, valued the most points, and requires paragraph responses. And so those are steps for you to complete the paper 3 and to assist you in being effective in getting maximum points. Okay? And so with that being said, I want us to now move into specifically the most expensive question that you'll be approaching, which is the directed writing question. And to help you get a better understanding, I want to skip directly. Sorry, I went ahead quickly. There we are. These are some notes that I'd suggest that you can copy down as well. I just gave you some steps on approaching the paper as a whole. When reading the directed writing question itself, it is somewhat like a test because you are expected to extract specific information from it. If you notice, there are 4 specific questions that are listed here, and any directed writing question you are given, whether it is for the paper 3 or it is for the paper 4, you should and must locate these question requirements to write an effective response. Because it is a directed writing question, they want you to write in a specific mode. They want you to pretend to be a specific person, and they want your answer to have a specific purpose. And so therefore, it is very important for you to locate when reading directed writing question, who are you as the writer? You should also determine who is your audience, because that determines the way that your information is phrased and crafted, and also what should be the purpose of your response. Next, you should look at what content to include. For those who may be unfamiliar with the term content, which I doubt, but nonetheless, content is the information from the passage needed to answer questions. Okay? And so as you read a directed writing question, you have to figure out, who am I as the writer? Who is my audience? What content or information from the passage must I include? And more importantly, what format must I use? Now, format refers to how you present your answer. We are going to look at a sample question right now, and I'm going to show you how these information are to be gleaned or inferred from the questions as you read them. At this time, I'm going to just pop into the chat to see if there's any questions that I may need to cover as I go in my discussion, but we want to now look at how to approach it. Yes, okay, yes, send all your questions to Ms. Barr. Very good. We are now looking at a sample directed writing question. As you can see at the bottom, there are 4 specific things we must look for: the writer, the audience, the content, and the format. The instructions say to us, please read the question below and locate the question requirements. This is a sample paper 3 directed writing question. The question reads, you are the Minister of Health in the Bahamas. In an address to the nation, explain what the Department of Health has done to reduce mosquito-borne illness, to reduce mosquito-borne diseases, and what residents can do to reduce the threat of it. Your speech should be no more than 300 words. That is a sample directed writing question. You are expected to find these 4 pieces of information. First of all, how do we determine who we are as the writer? It is explicitly stated in the first line. I'm the Minister of Health. As the candidate responding to this question, pretending to be the Minister of Health, your audience then automatically infers is that you are addressing the general public or Bahamians. And so as the Minister of Health, the person in authority role, it is your job to speak with formal language, be informative, and address much like how the Prime Minister has been addressing us during this COVID crisis each time. And so you are the Minister of Health. You are talking to the Bahamian people. And because it's an address, if you notice in the question, address is a substitute for a speech. And so this is where awareness of synonyms are important. And so my format now is a speech. Sometimes you may be asked to write a formal letter. Sometimes you may be asked to write an article. Sometimes you may be asked to write a journal entry. Each of those format types have different requirements. For instance, in this particular question where I'm addressing the audience, I must first introduce myself. I must also address my audience directly. But even more importantly, I must state the purpose of my speech. I must use a conversational tone. And at certain points, I may even have to use a bit of we or I to include the Bahamian people in it because I'm a representative figure. All of those various aspects that I just mentioned fall under what we call the style points. That is when not just the information from the passage is graded by examiners, but examiners now look at how you present your language and your information, your grammar, your ability to represent the specific instructions of the question. And so Minister of Health, speaking to the Bahamian public, what is the content that we're talking about? Now, this is where reading the question and underlining the key terms are important. For instance, where did I go? Sorry, but I have a little technical difficulty, so just skipped ahead. Okay, there we are. So as we look in the question, in the second line, it reads, in an address to the nation, explain what the Department of Health has done to reduce mosquito-borne illnesses. If you pay attention closely to the way that that sentence is structured, that's a compound sentence. And it's now joined by and an independent clause, and it reads, and what residents can do to reduce the threat of it. And so therefore, this particular directed writing question is asking 2 aspects of content from you. They require you to say what the Department of Health has done to reduce mosquito-borne diseases. And then you must talk about what residents or the same Bahamian public that you are addressing as your audience, what they can do to help reduce the threat. And so when you would read a question like this on your examination paper, I would expect to see the words Minister of Health in the Bahamas underlined, addressed to the nation. What Department of Health has done to reduce mosquito-borne diseases. Residents circled, reduce threat to, speech circled, 300 words circled. I suggest that you try to place those 4 words, just how you put them underneath the question, so that when you get into the examination itself, it is much easier for you to locate this information. Because a question like this is worth 16 out of 45 marks. That is almost half of the examination points in one question. This is the last question on your paper, and if you notice, they're asking you to write 300 words. And so it is not information that you glean from your own personal life. It is actually taken from that 1,750 word passage that you must read. And so, Minister of Health, talking to the nation about what your department has done and about what residents can do to reduce mosquito-borne illnesses, you have 300 words to do it. You must use a conversational tone, address the audience directly. You must be able to state your purpose for being there, introduce yourself. And so that is the sample directed writing question. Now, if you are able, I want to change that if. As you extract these requirements from the question, it makes it a bit more easier to now approach that lengthy passage and locate that content. If you approach this question first, as you read actively and highlight, you will actually begin to locate the information for your other questions, therefore making the passage easier to digest. When you answer this particular question first, you have enough time to go and adjust it to add more. But even more importantly, this question will take up the lion's share of your time. And with that being said, this is the one that you must effectively respond to if you want to be successful on the paper 3, but even more importantly for your overall language BGCSE. And so as you read a directed writing question, I just want to reiterate, you ask yourself or you locate the 4 things. Who am I as the writer? Who is my audience? What is the content that I must include? And what is my format? Remember, for each question, this changes. Okay? Now, as we progress and move along, I want to give you some steps on how to write the directed writing response. Now, as indicated before, this response takes the most time, but even more importantly, requires you to locate the most content. With that being said, the information will be dispersed throughout the passage. It will not all be in one place. That is the first thing I want to mention. Second point that I want to make, with the information being dotted everywhere, you are going to have to paraphrase or rephrase those ideas into your own words. Third point, because it is a continuous writing answer, or an answer in which you must use paragraphs, it must be organized. And so some type of outlining of those points are important. If you are a skilled language arts student that is quite adept, you may be able to get away with placing numbers in the passage and know that you want to pull that point. And you may be able to avoid lifting. But it is important that as you read and underline, when you go to approach this answer, you should jot down in an outline the points that you're going to make. So I want to give you these few steps and tips on how to write your directed writing response. Okay? And the directed writing response steps are as follows. 1, highlight needed content in the passage. If you had followed the steps from before, you would have already done this step because that is the second step when approaching the paper 3. We've already read the question and seen the 4 pieces of information we need. We've read the passage and highlighted what we need. And so as you now see, we get to step 2. I've highlighted everything in the passage. I now must paraphrase the content and group the similar ideas. Going back to the example previously of the speech as Minister of Health, all of the things that your department has done must go into one section of your response. Things that the residents must do must go into another section. Now, even though this is an exam that counts your content points, the content must be organized and must flow. You cannot mention one from the residents and then immediately behind that mention one from the government, because that's improper formatting. And so you see, even the formatting of these responses are important. And so I'm admonishing you that after you've highlighted the information in the passage, I'd like you to paraphrase and group the similar ideas together. You can group them together by creating an outline. And this outline will help you to write effective paragraphs, because examiners expect to see a topic sentence, Your transitions are expected to be used. You should have some sentence variety. Your paragraphs must have a topic sentence, supporting sentence, closing sentence, or clincher sentence, and you must have an introduction and a conclusion. The same goes for your summary question that we will go into later on in subsequent sessions this week. But anytime you're writing paragraph responses, it must be organized and it must utilize or it must have all of the elements of a structured paragraph. And then last but not least, after you've written this great response, you proofread your response for grammar, sufficient content, and appropriate style. Do you have a conversational tone for your speech? Does your article that you were asked to write, does it have a title? The journal entry that you wrote, did you write it from first person? Did you put their journal and write the date? And so all of those things factor into what we call your style and your content points. And so as you approach the directed writing response, it is important that you highlight your needed content, paraphrase and group those similar ideas, create an outline to write your response in paragraphs, and you proofread your response for grammar, sufficient content, and the appropriate style. As the note says at the bottom, style refers to the formatting of the answer, the language used, and the accuracy of the grammar compose the style points. As you're now moving forward, we're almost done. We have about another 10 to 15 minutes remaining, and I just have a few more slides, very simple, but if there are any questions, remember, feel free to note into the window and ask this bar. But as we progress again, I want to remind you of some tips for this particular paper. Now, we've looked at the directed writing, but these are general. 1, did you circle the multiple choice answers on the examination paper? If you did this, this is wrong. In yesterday's session, remember, nothing is written in the question paper. Everything is written in the answer booklet. Okay? Next, the answers to the questions will never repeat themselves. So if you find yourself giving the same answer for more than one question, something is wrong. This goes to understanding what the question is asking you, which is why the first step in approaching this paper is to read the questions and highlight needed content, because you would know what the question is requiring and would not repeat information. And so each question has its very own specific set of content. And so repetitive information, if you find that, then you may have misinterpreted something somewhere. The next red flag or next important tip to remember, if you find yourself writing just one paragraph for a question worth 10 points or more, something is wrong. Remember, your two most expensive questions on this paper are the summary and the directed writing. For the paper 4, those are the only types of questions that you get. And so if you go into paper 3 and you see a question worth more than 10 points, you already know that you must write a paragraph response. You must also have proper paragraphing structure. And you must also have all of those style elements to find yourself being successful. Another set of tips I want to share with you. Do not spend a lot of time on questions worth 1 to 2 points. This is why you answer the last question first, which is your directed writing. 2, do not lift information from the passage unless you are asked to quote. This is why paraphrasing is important. And this is why I'm encouraging you to jot an outline, because you would not run the risk of lifting if you attempt to put in your own words before attempting to write the actual answer. This is very important to note. Do not use ideas that are not from the passage unless you are asked to do so. Only in the paper 4 are you allowed to introduce one idea of your own. But the idea that you introduce must be relevant, or it must associate with the ideas presented in the passage. And so even though you may have personal knowledge on a particular topic, you cannot write that information in there if it is not given in the passage. So it's very important for you to stay within the passage, which is why it's important to know what the question requires, which is why it is also important to highlight as you read, and this is why it's also important to paraphrase to ensure that you're on the track. The last thing that I want to mention here is do not use SMS style of writing. SMS, that means text writing. Do not use you for you, R for instead of R, A-R-E, or for instead of for, or even for the number 4. This is a standard language exam. And so it's important that you remember those particular tips. So we want to focus most of our time on those big ticket questions, which are the summary and the directed writing. We want to paraphrase the information so that we can show the examiners that we have a clear understanding of what's being said and that we have a great range of vocabulary, putting us in a different class of writer. We also must stick to the ideas that are from the passage, and we must remember to always use standard English language. And so those are some tips I would like to make you aware of as you approach this paper. Now we're going to do a little activity because I've been talking for quite a minute. There are 3 different directed writing questions here. I would like for everyone in their chat window, please, and I'm going to review it. I'll give everyone 3 minutes. I would like for you to tell me, please. We're going to make this challenging. We're going to start with number 2. I would like for you to type into the chat window who is the writer, the audience, the content, and the format for question number 2. Let us see if you're able to extract that information. Please tell me the 4 question requirements for question number 2. For question number 2, it reads, write an article for the tourist. Write an article for tourists presenting Carrefour as a tourist attraction. I need for you to tell me who is the writer. I need for you to tell me who is the audience it is addressed to. I need to know the content that is to be included, and I would like to also know the format that you are to use. Those are the 4 things you must locate. That is a directed writing question, though it is 1 sentence. Okay, article writer. I can accept that for now. Let's see if someone else comes up with a response. Very good, Ms. Adley. The audience are tourists. Very good, Ms. Major. Don't let the 1 sentence fool you. An article writer. Okay, Mr. Forbes, you can accept that. Okay, show all. Okay, let's see. What is attractive about Corfu to tourists? Okay, very good attempt, Ms. Adley. This is my question. What do you call people? Sorry, people traveling are called travelers, right? But suppose I want to travel somewhere and I don't know where to go. What type of magazine can I buy to know where to go? What kind of magazine can I buy to know where I go? I want to travel somewhere next summer. Where would I go? What magazine would I go to the bookstore and buy? That would indicate to you who your writer is. And I'll explain in a moment. Not really, Shiloh. We can agree on the audience is a tourist. We are correct. Okay. The writer would be the Corfu owner, article writer. Very good. Travel magazine writer. That is the term that I was looking for. Because if you're writing for tourists and it's an article, chances are it's going to go in a newspaper publication or inside a magazine. If your audience are tourists, then that means this must be a travel magazine. And so DS, you're quite correct where you say a travel magazine writer and the same thing. Okay, and so now, when they say present Corfu as a tourist attraction, this is where I want to test and I want to show you how analyzing the question helps. What are some things or what are some details you would put into an answer like this? Now, bear in mind, you haven't read the passage. But if you're a travel magazine writer writing for tourists about a place called Corfu, what are some of the details that you would include in such a response? Cost efficiency, okay. Family friendly, the location. What people like to buy, where it is located. People visit our country for the what? Sun, sand, and sea, okay. Food, jewelry, okay, weather. Now you realize we only read this question and you are coming up with answers. Should you be in an exam and you're able to break down the question like this, your mind begin to predict and project what type of information you should be coming across as you read. And so therefore it makes it much more easier to read that lengthy passage. Now you guys did a very good job in number 2. Now guess what? I have a confession to make. Number 2 is a directed writing question from paper 4. That is a directed writing question from paper 4. You notice our directed writing question does not have to be lengthy, but it's important for you to locate that information. Now, that one was easy, right? This is the last one for practice prior to us leaving, before we go. This is how you can expect your directed writing question to look. You see how much help this give you in the exam? This is how the directed writing question is laid out, and this is from, if I'm not mistaken, 2019's paper. Okay? Now I'm going to leave this question here for you to read, and I would like for you to do the same thing with this question that you did just now for that question number 2 on Corfu. Let's see if we can find those 4 pieces of information from the directed writing question. And go. Okay. Hey, Alicia. Yes, the general public is our audience. Okay. So who would you be as the writer? No problem at all, Ms. Major. Okay. So we have our audience and we have our writer. Okay, very, very good, Tatiana, journalist. 248. Who's that? Who's that, Cash? The audience is the audience is the Mimian people. 2485534 will be a publisher of the newspaper. Okay, what content should we be including? Let's see. Okay. Audience, history researchers. Okay, newspaper writer. Okay, very good detail, DS. There's one thing that needs to be adjusted, DS. Your format. What are you writing? What is this answer asking you to write? Very good, Cartwright. Yes, Mr. Forbes, the scale of poverty. On the Bahamian people during which time? Because they gave us a particular focus era, 1930. Now, very good. So we are newspaper writers, historians, or researchers. Our audience would be the general public. we're writing a newspaper article, and what all they want us to include. I want to draw your attention to D. Look at D when it says writing the article, be sure to. Oh, what happened here? Oh. It says here, provide support for points. Move beyond merely listing points by exploring at least 4 specific negative ways in which some Bahamian parents, they put in brackets mothers and fathers, were affected by the poverty they endured in the 1930s, and at least 3 specific ways in which their children suffered as a result of the family's low income status. Now, I want to point out, we have about 4 minutes remaining. I want to point out a quick tidbit here to help you kind of, it's an estimation and it's not absolute. This question is worth 16 marks, right? They want you to write a 400-word essay, which is an article. Now, remember those style points that I spoke about? Now, your content point is going to be the 4 specific ways that Bahamian parents were affected. If you notice, they gave you 2 sets of people. That's mothers and fathers. How did the poverty affect the mothers? How did the poverty affect the fathers? But it didn't stop there, you know. And then it turned around and said at least 3 specific ways in which the children suffered as a result of the family's low income status. So 1, those are 3 different individual groups that we are talking about. So that's 3. The question is worth 16 marks. You have content and style that makes up your answers. And so therefore that's 16 marks divided into 2 categories. They want to start 4, let's just say for a minute, 4 for the mother, 4 for the father, that's 8. 3 for the kids, that's 11. That leaves another 5 points. Let's just say roughly your style points for this question ranges from 1 to 3 marks. There's about 14 pieces of content that you should be estimated to find. Now, bear in mind, this is an estimation. And examiners have made the questions quite detailed as of late, so students will be able to access it much easier. Notice they tell you who your audience are. They say use appropriate tone. They say use 3rd person, so that's you as the writer, how you must speak. They say convey the purpose of the article. You have to have a title that does that. You have to also state it in the introduction. But then they tell you what content they want. They want 4 for mothers and possibly 4 for fathers, so that's 8. 3 for children, that's 11. With 5 points left for style. As you read, you may find that it might be 6 for the fathers, and then only 3 for the mothers, and then the 3 for the kids. But you also want, when you read the question, is to look at the points so you can determine how many pieces of content should I come up with, and how much should be included in my response. Now, that brings us to the end of today's tutorial. We are only given a certain amount of window, and the room is to be used by other individuals. But I want to know, are there any questions or any queries or any concerns before we leave the session? Next thing, is there any area of particular focus that you would like for Ms. Barr and I to cover for you? Okay. Thank you much, DS. I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Major. I'm glad that you guys did. Lifting is when you write the information from the passage directly, word for word, and you were not asked to quote. Okay? And so lifting is to take passage information directly to put as your response and not paraphrase it into your own words. Okay? If there are any areas that you would like for us to cover, you can feel free to insert here in the message window. I would also like to thank Ms. Barr for being here today with us as well and acting as our, well, I was at Iron Belly for a while. That was years ago. But story writing for paper 1. Okay, no problem at all. We had seen to insert those aspects to assist you so that everyone will be able to get what they need. And so I'm glad everyone enjoyed. So I would like to thank you all for being here. I'd also like to continue to admonish you to be safe and to stay at home. And I look forward to seeing you in session tomorrow, where we will be looking at the summary question and how to approach and break that down more effectively. It's been a pleasure, you guys. Have a good day. Until then. Miss Major, we are going with it to see. And so in time, we'd be able to ascertain that, but as you know, we're starting out. And so give us some time and I'll be able to know. If you want, I can be able to create some things for you guys to practice on your own, but I don't want to make it assignment like there's a must. I'm also waiting on some more clarity on how we're going to be moving forward in the subsequent sessions. So that's no problem at all. I'll be able to create some things and you guys can get some individual practice time. Okay. With that being said, that's our time. I will see you guys in tomorrow's session. Okay. Have a great day.
It's writing time, boys and girls. Are you ready? Before we start writing, we have to plan. For today's lesson, you need a sheet of paper, a pencil, crayons, and your imagination. Today, we're going to draw a friendly monster. So, let's brainstorm. As we are brainstorming, think about your monster. What size is it going to be? What will its body look like? How many eyes will it have? Will it have hands and feet? Does your monster have hair? Are you thinking? Did you make a picture of your monster in your mind? Great! Okay, now it's time to draw. Draw your friendly monster on your paper. As you draw, remember to put all the ideas from your imagination on your paper. Are you ready to do that? Get started! Make sure you include all those things we thought about. Its eye, its body, its hands and feet, and its hair. How is it going? I know you are drawing a wonderful friendly monster. Keep going. When you're finished, pick 2 colors from your crayons and take your time to color your friendly monster. Remember to only use 2 colors and stay in the line. Are you coloring? Great job, guys. Time's almost up. Does it have eyes, body, hands and feet and hair? Well done, guys. Now that you're done, give it to someone to keep until next time. And here's my monster. Did I do a good job?